Good morning. I know what you're thinking. Patrick, your Anglo-Catholic roots are beginning to show through. Well, no, they're not. Although I have to say that a truly biblical and charismatic Anglo-Catholicism is a most beautiful expression of Christian worship and discipleship. But no, here's the point. When we put the title of saint on the first disciples, we do them a real disservice. Yes, they were saints, if by that you mean they were set apart for God, just as we are. Yes, then they were saints. But otherwise, they were very ordinary people. And once again in our Bible reading today, we can see just how ordinary they were. We heard yesterday in Mark's Gospel that Jesus has recognized the pressure on himself and his disciples from their non-stop ministry. He's encouraged them to go away somewhere quiet. They are exhausted. But when they arrive at their chosen retreat they find that the crowds have anticipated where they were going, and they've got there before them. And here it is, Mark 6:33 to 38. Many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time it was very late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "That would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. "Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. You can hear the frustration in the disciples' voices, can't you? They say to Jesus, "Look, it's late. Send the people away. Let them get something to eat." "You give them something to eat," says Jesus. And here it comes. All the disciples' frustration and tiredness and fed-upness come bursting out. "Yeah, right," they reply. "It would take 8 months' wages to buy enough bread for them all." Well, read between the lines. The disciples have had enough. They were exhausted before they arrived at this place. They'd been promised a rest, and they must have been at least as concerned for Jesus' well-being as they were for themselves. "We can't do it. What you're asking is unreasonable. Actually, it's impossible. Give us a break. We can't do it." Does that set a few little warning bells going in your head? It probably should. "Nothing is impossible with God," said Jesus to his disciples in another place. And that's our message for today. How many times have you and I said, or at least thought, "Lord, I can't do this. What do you expect me to do? You're being unreasonable." I want you to be encouraged with me today to replace "I can't," "we can't," with the phrase "nothing is impossible with God." Let me give you one quick story to demonstrate how "we can't" can turn into "with God, we can." Today marks the anniversary of the Third Battle of Ypres, Wipers, the Tommies called it, in the First World War. Ypres is in Belgium, and it's a pretty little place today. It wasn't in the First World War. The Ypres salient is a name etched, in fact permanently scarred into the memory of everyone who's studied the history of the First World War, who has visited the battlefield. The Ypres salient is one of the strategic centres for the Allied defence against the invading German armies. There were 3 major battles fought over the Ypres salient. The scars of the battle are still visible today. Trenches still preserved where they were dug, acres and acres of war graves marking every major offensive, and year by year bodies being dug out of the earth by the tractors that now till the earth of the battlefields. The Third Battle of Ypres is known by another name, Passchendaele. Never was there a more appropriate name for a battlefield. I've stood at the top of the very slight incline over which the Allies had to advance to capture Passchendaele, and I've wept over the scene. The figures are still disputed, but the best estimate is that between September and December 1917, at least 260,000 soldiers on each side were killed in this battle, and the actual tally is surely much higher. One beacon of light, one miracle if you like, shines out from the mud and the morass of Ypres. A house was made available to the British Army in Poperinghe, a little village just outside Ypres itself. An army chaplain, the Reverend Tubby Clayton, saw a use for the property as a soldiers' club. It became a rare place where soldiers could meet and relax, regardless of rank, an everyman's club. It was known as Talbot House, named after the youngest son of Bishop Talbot of Winchester, who was killed in the Ypres salient on the 30th of July 1915, yesterday in fact. You may recognise the name Talbot House from the First World War signallers code, TOC H. The charity is still known by this name today. Why am I telling you this? Because Talbot House became a haven, an oasis of rest and recuperation for the thousands of soldiers who were fighting in the area. It was a loaves and fishes moment for one of our chaplains. A large house, a beautiful garden, a large living room, a kitchen for the endless cups of tea and snacks that the soldiers needed, a lending library, and what was called the upper room, which Tubby made into a chapel, complete with an organ and an altar. All these things gave the soldiers, thousands of Allied soldiers eventually, just a moment of sanity, a pause for reflection, and for some a time to make their peace with God in the middle of all the chaos and the grief of the war. TOC H, loaves and fishes, has been a gift from God all through the First and then the Second World Wars. It's still going strong today, although it's now in desperate need of financial help. Jesus said, "You give them something to eat." What do you expect us to do, is the disciples' question to Jesus. We don't have the resources. The feeding of the 5,000 is probably one of the most important lessons we have to learn in our discipleship. The creation of Talbot House was a complete step of faith. A chaplain saw what seemed like an impossible need and set about meeting that need. Thousands of Allied soldiers, most of whom had faced battle before and were looking into the face of battle once again on the Ypres salient. Many, like Jesus' disciples, would actually give their lives in the battle that began today. But their sacrifice turned defeat into victory. We don't have the resources is probably the place that we're always going to start in establishing the kingdom of God on earth. But in the words of Jesus, with God, all things are possible. That was certainly the case with Talbot House in Poperinghe. Loaves and fishes indeed for countless, countless soldiers. You give them something to eat. Please will you take that as your personal creed for your own discipleship today. God bless you.